too small to matter. Lyra was only 4 feet tall. Even among her own people, she was considered small. She had soft lavender skin, wide glowing eyes, and thin fingers that moved quickly like dancing light. But in the busy trade station orbiting planet Tiran, she was invisible. No one looked at her twice. She walked through the crowd with her head down, hugging a small metal tablet close to her chest. On that tablet were her inventions, designs, power systems, and circuit ideas that could help entire ships work better. But no one wanted to hear them. Too small, they would say. Come back when you grow up, kid. Even though Lyra was already 21 cycles old, everyone treated her like a child. Her voice was soft, her steps light, and her presence quiet. She had learned long ago. People respected big things, big muscles, big weapons, big egos. She had none of those. That day the station was crowded. Supplies had just arrived. Everyone was pushing and shouting in the docks. Lyra waited near the edge, hoping to get a small battery unit she needed for her designs. But bigger aliens pushed past her. She was nearly knocked over twice. Then it happened. A loud explosion rocked the loading bay. Someone shouted, "Thieves, they're stealing the crates." Panic spread fast. Heavy crates tipped over. A crowd rushed backward. Lyra's small frame was no match for the stampede. She tripped and fell. Metal crates fell toward her. She covered her head. A shadow fell over her. A large human man dove in front of her, using his body as a shield. He grunted as the crate hit. His shoulder unrolled off. His arm stayed over Lyra, protecting her from the chaos. "Hey," he said, breathing hard. "You all right?" Lyra looked up, blinking. The man had a rough beard, short brown hair, and a scar on his left cheek. His jacket was worn, covered in oil stains. He looked like a mechanic, but his eyes were kind. I think so," Lyra whispered. The human slowly helped her to her feet. She barely reached his chest. "You almost got crushed," he said. "You gotta be careful in this madness." "I was just waiting, Corey, for a battery unit," she said softly. He blinked. "You work with tech?" She nodded and held up her tablet. "I make things." He chuckled. "That's cute." Lyra's heart sank. Cute. That word again. Like a pet. Like a toy. She pulled her hand back and turned to leave. But then he surprised her. "I'm Jonas," he said, holding out his hand. "You're real brave to come into a riot for one part. I respect that." Lyra hesitated. Then she slowly shook. His hand. His grip was gentle, careful not to hurt her. "I'm Lyra," she replied. Just then, station guards arrived and pushed everyone back. The stolen crates were gone, but the danger had passed. People began to move again. Jonas looked at her with a tilted head. "Where's your place? You okay walking alone?" "I'm used to it," Lyra said. But there was something in her voice that made him frown. "Let me walk you there. I don't feel right letting someone small like you go alone after that mess." Lyra almost refused. But something in her chest, some strange warmth, made her nod. As they walked through the narrow maintenance tunnels, Lyra spoke a little more. She told him how she lived inside an old storage unit near the lower decks, how she fixed things for food credits, how people ignored her designs. Jonas listened without interrupting. "You know," he said, "most people don't listen. They think being small means you're not strong, but I've seen small things blow up whole starships." That made Lyra smile a little. They reached her place, a tiny space filled with tools, parts, and small, glowing orbs. Jonas looked around surprised. "You made all this?" "Yes," Lyra said, suddenly shy. Jonas picked up a small device. "This is power-stable tech. You designed this?" She nodded again. "You're brilliant," he said simply. Lyra didn't know what to say. No one had ever called her that. Then, in the shadows outside her room, a figure watched them. He wore a dark hood, his skin gray and marked with old scars. His eyes locked onto Lyra and his lips curled into a cruel smile. "So, the little one is still alive," he whispered. They'll pay good credits for her. Inside, Lyra showed Jonas one of her designs. Her hands moved fast as she explained the parts. He listened with full attention. "Why haven't you shown this to the engineers upstairs?" he asked. "They say I'm too small to be serious," she said quietly. Jonas leaned closer. "They're fools," he said. "If they can't see what you're worth, then I'll make sure someone does." Lyra's chest felt warm again. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't too small to matter after all. But danger was already coming, and this small alien girl was about to be at the center of something much bigger. The next morning, Lyra wasn't sure if Jonas would come back. She had met many people on the station. Most smiled once and never returned. Some even made promises they never meant to keep. That's why, even though her heart had felt strange last night, warm, hopeful, she told herself not to expect anything. She got up early, cleaned her tools, and tried to focus on her work. But when she opened the sliding panel that served as her door, she froze. Jonas was sitting right there, leaning against the wall, holding 2 mugs of hot stim coffee. "Morning," he said with a tired grin. "Didn't know if you liked the bitter stuff, so I brought both sweet and strong." Lyra blinked. She had no words. No one had ever waited for her like this. She reached out slowly, took the sweet cup, and nodded. "Thank you. Why did you come back?" Jonas looked at her seriously now. "Because you're not just smart. You're special, Lyra. That design you showed me last night, that wasn't just impressive, it's revolutionary. Power stabilization like that could save hundreds of ships from blowing up." She looked down. "I tried to show the upper deck engineers once, they laughed. One said I was a cute little hobbyist. Another asked if my daddy helped me." Jonas frowned. "Then they're blind." He stepped into her small living space again, carefully avoiding the hanging wires and glowing crystals. The air smelled of metal, old oil, and something sweet. Maybe fruit paste she had saved for later. He sat down on a crate and studied her sketches on the wall. "You know," he said slowly, "I used to be a soldier, before I became a mechanic. Saw a lot of things explode for no reason. Lives lost because of bad design. What you have here, it could have saved lives." Lyra's throat tightened. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Jonas shrugged. "Maybe because I know what it's like to be overlooked. Not because of height, but because of where I came from. Grew up on a mining colony, dirty, poor. No one cared what I said either, until one man looked twice, gave me a chance." She looked up into his eyes. "And you're doing that now?" He gave her a soft smile. "Something like that." For the next few hours, they worked side by side. Lyra showed him her small power cube, the one that could run on scraps and recharge in half the time of standard models. Jonas helped adjust the alignment, tightening loose seals with his thick fingers. She watched the way his hands moved. Strong, sure, but always gentle with her tools. Every time their eyes met, something silent passed between them. A kind of quiet understanding. Later, they went to the lower market to find parts. As they walked, side by side, heads began to turn. A tall human man walking with a tiny alien girl was not common. Some aliens laughed quietly. Others looked in confusion. Lyra tried to ignore them, but her steps slowed. Jonas noticed and said softly, "You, okay?" She nodded quickly. "I'm just not used to being seen." "Good," Jonas replied. "Then let them see you now. The real you." They reached a scrap booth where a bald, grumpy merchant glared at Lyra. "You again? I told you before, this ain't a doll shop." Jonas stepped forward. "She's not a doll. She's an engineer. Show some respect." The merchant looked Jonas up and down. "Oh, you're serious?" Lyra stood frozen. She had never seen anyone defend her like that. After getting what they needed, they walked back. Lyra didn't say much, but Jonas could tell her mind was full. Inside her room again, she finally whispered, "You really think I'm worth something?" He looked at her with quiet strength. I think you're worth more than anyone here realizes." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then a soft, shaky voice escaped her lips. "They said I'd never be loved, that no one would ever want someone my size, that I looked like a child, sounded like one, and that I'd always be alone." Jonas didn't speak right away. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, smooth stone. He placed it on her workbench. "This is from my home. It's called a truth stone. We gave it to people who changed our lives." Lyra stared at the stone, eyes wide. "I want you to have it," he said. "But why?" "Because you've already changed mine." Just then, a soft sound buzzed from the hallway. A small insect drone floated outside the door, blinking red. Jonas moved fast, pulling Lyra to the side as a tiny spark exploded on the panel. Someone had tried to send a message or a warning. Jonas looked at her. "That wasn't random." Lyra nodded, heart racing. "They're watching." And deep in the shadows, the hooded figure from before stood at a distance, speaking into a communicator. "The human's with her now. Should I proceed?" A voice replied coldly. "Not yet. Let them think they're safe." Inside her little room, Lyra stood close to Jonas, hands shaking. But she was no longer alone. And someone had finally looked at her. Not once, not out of pity, but truly seen her. For Lyra, that changed everything. Lyra sat cross-legged on the floor of her little home, tools scattered around her like stars in the night sky. She moved with focus, fixing the damaged interface from the spark that hit her panel earlier. Jonas was across from her, watching her, hands work fast and smooth. He couldn't help but be impressed. She wasn't just smart, she was graceful in a way machines understood. Every flick of her fingers spoke to circuits and wires like a secret language. Yet under that talent, Jonas saw something more, a quiet strength, a heart that never stopped hoping, even after a lifetime of being ignored. "Do you ever sleep?" Jonas asked, half smiling. Lyra glanced up, a spark of amusement in her glowing eyes. "Only when my ideas run out. That hasn't happened in years." He chuckled and leaned back, scanning the drawings taped to the walls. Power cores, navigation grids, plasma coolers, all drawn by a girl barely 4 feet tall, living in a cargo container. "You ever think of showing this to someone beyond this station?" he asked. She hesitated, wiping grease from her cheek. "What's the point? People see my size and think I'm a joke. I once had a buyer ask if my designs were toys for children." Jonas sat up straighter. "Then they're blind. You've got more intelligence in your pinky than half the engineers I've worked with." Lyra looked down at her hands. "My people are naturally small, but I'm even smaller. I was born last in my clutch. Weak lungs, slow start. I nearly died. They called me the runt who refused to fade. Even my family said I'd never survive outside the homeworld." Jonas stared at her, eyes serious. "But you did." "Yes. I learned to stay quiet. I made things. I stayed out of the way. You don't belong in the shadows, Lyra." His voice was soft but heavy with meaning. Lyra blinked, heart trembling. She wasn't used to people speaking to her like this. Most talked over her, some laughed. A few tried to touch her head like she was a pet. But Jonas? He looked at her, really looked, as if her soul was bigger than the walls around her. Then, her voice trembled. "Why do you care so much?" Jonas hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "Because I've known loss. I've known what it feels like to be powerless, to be told you're not enough. And I've seen what happens when people give up on someone too soon." Lyra stood up and walked to the far side of the room, reaching behind a broken panel. She pulled out a small cube, dark green with glowing veins. She turned to face him. "This is my best design, a hybrid generator. It can recharge itself using environmental heat and solar drift. It's unstable, but if I had better parts, it could power small ships without fuel." Jonas's eyes widened. "That could change everything. Why haven't you shared this?" "I was waiting," she whispered, "for someone who would take me seriously." He reached out his hand, gently taking the cube. His fingers brushed hers. She looked up at him, her heart suddenly thudding. For a moment, they didn't speak. A soft knock echoed from outside. Jonas stepped toward the door, alert, but Lyra froze. She moved silently to a corner, grabbing a small mirror and angling it toward the door slit. Her eyes narrowed. "It's him," she whispered. "The hooded one." Jonas frowned. "He followed us again?" She nodded. "He's not just watching. He's tracking me." "Why?" Lyra stepped closer, her voice barely above a breath. "Because of what's in my blood." Jonas blinked. "Your blood?" Lyra took a deep breath. "I'm part of an old genetic line. My DNA carries a resistance to certain nanite-based plagues. It's rare. Some say it's lost tech. Others think it's worth billions, but either way I've been hunted for it before." Jonas's fists clenched. "And no one's helping you?" "No one's ever stayed long enough." Jonas turned to face her. "Well, I'm not going anywhere." Lyra's eyes widened. Her voice cracked. "But you could die helping me." Jonas stepped forward. "Or I could save someone who deserves to be saved." Just then the panel lit up red. A breach alert. "They're coming," Lyra said. Jonas grabbed her hand without thinking. "Then we go. Now." They ran out through a maintenance hatch, Lyra guiding him through tight spaces, vents and half-lit tunnels she had memorized over the years. Her tiny body darted like a spark between pipes. Jonas had to crouch, duck, and curse as he followed. But he kept up. They finally stopped in, a forgotten service room, both breathing hard. Lyra leaned against the wall, eyes closed. "They won't stop, Jonas, not now." Jonas stepped closer, looking down at her. "Then we give them a reason to stop." "How?" "We fight back. We show them that being small doesn't mean being weak." Lyra looked up, eyes shimmering, with something between fear and fire. In that moment, Jonas didn't see a tiny alien girl. He saw a warrior. Lyra had always known how to hide. Growing up in narrow tunnels and silent corners, she had learned to move quietly, speak less, and disappear when danger came. But now, hiding wasn't enough. Not when men with weapons and money were coming after her, because of what she carried in her blood. Not when a human like Jonas was beside her, willing to fight for her, willing to bleed for her. That changed everything. They stayed hidden in an abandoned coolant chamber deep inside the station's lower levels. Pipes hissed, steam rose, and broken lights flickered weakly above their heads. Lyra sat on a metal panel, her knees pulled to her chest, watching Jonas clean the burn wound on his arm. He had gotten it while pulling her out of the breach hatch earlier. He didn't complain once, not even when she saw blood staining his shirt. "You're hurt," she said softly. "I've been worse," he said, wincing as he tied the cloth tighter. "Don't worry. I'm more worried about you." She looked down. "This is my fault. If I had just kept hiding, you wouldn't be involved." Jonas shook his head. "Lyra, look at me." She did. "This isn't your fault. You didn't choose to be born with special blood. You didn't ask to be hunted, and you didn't ask me to care. But you do," she whispered. "I do," he said, without hesitation. Something warm lit up inside her chest. But the fear still stayed. They won't stop. "That hooded man, he works for buyers. They capture rare beings and sell them to governments, labs, black market warlords." Jonas cursed under his breath. "They want to turn you into a weapon." She nodded slowly. "They'll inject me, cut me, clone me. I won't be a person anymore, just something valuable to break apart." Jonas stood and began pacing. "Then, we leave this station. We get you off this rock, far from their reach." Lyra shook her head. "They have scanners everywhere, and once your face is on their list, they don't stop until you're in a cage." Jonas turned to her with fire in his eyes. "Then we fight. I've been hunted before. I know how to hit back." "You're not like me," she said. "You're big, strong, trained." Jonas walked over and knelt in front of her. "No, Lyra. I'm not like you. I've never had to grow up being seen as weak. I never had to fight with my mind while everyone laughed. I've never been hunted for just being born. You've survived all that. You're stronger than you think. Her eyes watered. You really believe that? He nodded slowly. I've seen your strength, in your ideas, in the way you ran through those tunnels, guiding me like you owned the place, and how you keep going, even when the whole galaxy tells you you're too small. A long silence passed between them. Then Lyra spoke, her voice steady. There's something else. A prototype I built a year ago. It's a shield system, small, light, and fast. I hid it. If we can get it, I might be able to protect us from tracking signals. But it's hidden in the old gravity chamber. That area was sealed months ago. Jonas's eyes lit up. Then that's our next move. Before they could leave, a sudden hiss echoed through the chamber. Jonas stood quickly, pulling Lyra behind him. The shadows shifted, and a small flying drone floated into the room, blinking red. A voice came through its speaker. Lyra of the Meraxi line, come quietly, and the human won't be harmed. Jonas grabbed a metal rod and hurled it. It struck, the drone hard, smashing it into the wall in a burst of sparks. Lyra stared, eyes wide. You didn't even think twice. I don't let machines threaten people I care about, he said simply. Her heart beat faster. They slipped into the maintenance tubes, racing toward the gravity chamber. As they crawled through pipes and climbed rusty ladders, Lyra whispered, directions. She knew every turn, every shortcut. Jonas followed her lead. It wasn't the human protecting the alien anymore. It was both of them protecting each other. When they finally reached the chamber, the doors were half buried under collapsed metal beams. Jonas used brute strength to clear the way, sweating and grunting. Lyra crawled through the narrow gap and returned holding a strange bracelet with glowing lights. This is it, she said. It can bend signal pulses, hide our heat signature for a short time. Jonas took a deep breath. Enough to get off this station? Maybe. They looked at each other. She reached out and placed the bracelet on his wrist. You'll wear it. You're easier to track. He hesitated. But it's meant for you. I said you wear it, she said firmly. You saved me twice now. I get to return the favor. Jonas smiled. All right, boss. Just then, a loud crash echoed from above. They found us, Lyra whispered. Jonas grabbed her hand again. Then we make our stand. And as the walls shook with footsteps and shouting voices, Lyra didn't feel small anymore. She felt ready. The sound of boots above them echoed like thunder through the metal walls. Lyra's breathing grew quick, but her fingers stayed steady as she pulled Jonas deeper into the hidden crawl space inside the old gravity chamber. Every corner of the station had secrets. Lyra just happened to know more of them than most. They crawled for several minutes through a tunnel no taller than a chair. Jonas had to lie flat and drag himself forward with his elbows, his broad shoulders scraping the pipes. You really lived in places like this? He whispered. Lyra didn't turn. Sometimes smaller spaces keep you safer. He didn't reply, but the truth hit him. She hadn't chosen small places because she liked them. She had been forced into them. The galaxy was too big to care about someone her size, so she made herself smaller, quieter, harder to notice. And now the whole galaxy was chasing her anyway. Finally, they emerged into an old storage vault, abandoned, dusty, but quiet. Jonas sat back, catching his breath. Lyra sat across from him, her knees pulled close, eyes thoughtful. He looked at her in the dim light, her skin softly glowing, her expression tight. Lyra, he said gently, it's time you told me the full truth. What exactly is it that they want from you? She hesitated. He leaned forward. If I'm going to protect you, I need to know what I'm protecting. Lyra didn't speak for a long moment. Then she took a deep breath and finally said, Do you know the term Gen 7? Jonas narrowed his eyes. Yeah, it's from the old war. Rumors say Gen 7 subjects were immune to nanite weapons, even biological plagues, but they were wiped out decades ago. Burned, buried, Erased. Lyra nodded. Not all of them. Jonas stared at her. You're one of them? She looked away. My mother was. She survived in hiding. The scientists called her a failed prototype because she didn't show full immunity. But when I was born, I did. I never get sick. I can breathe in thin air. I recover from injuries faster than normal, but that's not what scares them. Jonas leaned closer. What does? My cells replicate cleanly. Perfectly. Which means, she paused, they can copy me, clone me, use my DNA to make an army resistant to all their weapons. I'm not a person to them. I'm a formula. Her voice cracked at the end. Jonas cursed under his breath, then stood and paced the room. That's why they're hunting you. Not just because you're rare, but because you could break their whole system. Lyra nodded silently. They call it a genetic asset, a walking weapon. Jonas stopped pacing and looked at her. You're not a weapon, you're brilliant, brave, and alive. That matters more than your blood. Lyra blinked. You don't look at me like they do. You don't see something to be sold? No, he said, stepping closer. I see someone who's fought harder than anyone I've met. I see someone who's been told she's too small all her life, yet here she is, outsmarting bounty hunters, building tech from scraps, risking her life for the people around her. She swallowed, her voice small. And what do you want from me? Jonas dropped to one knee in front of her and looked into her eyes. I just want you safe. That's all. Her eyes shimmered with something fragile. Even if I'm dangerous to know, you're only dangerous to people who try to cage you. Before she could reply, the vault lights flickered. A warning system blinked near the corner. Someone was scanning the corridor nearby. Lyra stood up quickly. We need to move again. They're sweeping the station. If they find this place, they'll lock every exit. Jonas nodded and grabbed the shield bracelet from his belt. How long can this thing hide us? 30 seconds at most. Enough to cross the sensor gate near the reactor. Jonas nodded. Again. Then we run. They bolted through narrow halls, through clouds of dust and broken doors until they reached the outer rim of the reactor chamber. The glowing coils buzzed with heat and light. The sensor field shimmered faintly, almost invisible to normal eyes. On my mark, Lyra said, holding a small device in her hand. Jonas watched her, admiring how her hands didn't even shake now. 3, 2, 1, go. They ran together. Lyra activated the bracelet, and for a few precious seconds, they were shadows in a silent storm. The field didn't detect them. They passed through, but on the other side someone was waiting. The hooded man. He stepped forward, flanked by 2 guards in black armor. You've made this far, little one, he said. But you're out of places to run. Jonas stood in front of Lyra. You'll have to go through me first, the man smiled. Gladly. And before Lyra could scream, the fight began. Jonas lunged without hesitation. His fist slammed into the guard on the right, knocking the armored alien back with a heavy crash. But the other soldier moved fast, striking Jonas in the ribs with a stun rod. Sparks flew. Jonas groaned, stumbling. Lyra gasped and took a step forward, but Jonas growled, "Stay back." His voice wasn't loud, but it was strong, determined. The hooded man didn't flinch. His cold gray eyes stayed on Lyra, as if Jonas was just a temporary obstacle. You think this human can protect you forever, little one? He said, slowly pulling out a thin silver weapon. We know what you are, and we know what your blood is worth. This station has 10 more agents waiting. You have nowhere left to hide. Lyra felt the old fear rise inside her, the fear she had carried since childhood, the fear of being caught, tested, caged. But something was different this time. Jonas was bleeding, panting, still trying to stand between her and death. No one had ever stood for her like this. No one had ever believed she was worth it. That made her hands tremble, not from fear, but from rage. She was done hiding. She looked around quickly, her sharp eyes catching a loose energy coil hanging from the side of the reactor wall. It was damaged, half exposed, sparking gently. She whispered a calculation in her head. If she could boost the current through that coil, she could blind them for a few seconds. That was all they needed. As the guard raised his weapon again, Lyra darted forward. "No!" Jonas shouted, trying to grab her, but she slipped past him like a flash of light. She leapt onto a side panel, grabbed a wrench from her belt, and slammed it into the coil's control box. The lights flickered violently. Sparks burst in all directions. A loud screech filled the air. The guard staggered. The hooded man cursed and covered his eyes. "Jonas, now!" Lyra screamed. Without thinking, Jonas tackled the second guard, slamming him against the wall. Lyra pulled a shock pellet from her belt and tossed it at the leader's feet. The blast sent him flying backward. They ran. Down the service stairs, through thick smoke and blaring alarms. The station's systems began reacting to the reactor spike. Lockdown sirens wailed. Emergency lights blinked red. Every few steps, Jonas stumbled from the hits he took earlier. But Lyra didn't leave. His side. She wrapped his arm around her shoulders and supported his weight, even if she could barely lift half of him. "You're gonna pass out," she said. "Not before I get you out of here," he groaned, blood on his lip. They finally reached a forgotten cargo dock on the outer ring. There sat an old half-functional maintenance ship just big enough for two. Lyra scrambled to override the door. Her fingers shook as she entered the code. A deep rumble answered. The ship opened. "Get inside," she told Jonas. He collapsed into the co-pilot seat as Lyra ran to the controls. She connected her portable. Drive hot-wired the ignition and shouted, "Come on, old girl, fly for me." The ship shuddered, then lifted. Just then the screen flashed, an incoming message. It was the hooded man. His face was bruised, his lip cut, but his voice calm. "Run all you want. Every lab in this galaxy wants your DNA. No matter where you go, they'll chase you." Lyra stared at the screen, then replied, "Let them come." She shut it off and pushed the ship into full speed. As they escaped the station, stars streaked by, and the massive spaceport faded behind them. Silence settled in the ship. Jonas coughed, then laughed weakly. You really fried their sensors back there." Lyra smiled softly. "I had to do something." He looked at her, breathing hard. "You weren't afraid." She turned to him. "I was, but I've been afraid my whole life, and I'm tired of letting it stop me." He reached out, his hand resting gently on hers. "You were amazing, Lyra." She lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry you got hurt." He squeezed her fingers lightly. "You're worth it." Tears welled up in her eyes. "They always said I was too small, too weak, a failed experiment." Jonas shook his head slowly. They were wrong. Lyra leaned back in the pilot seat and let out a shaky breath. For the first time, she didn't feel like a burden. She didn't feel like a mistake. She had saved them both. She had chosen to fight, and she had won. In the silence of space, with stars stretching out ahead, she felt something rise inside her, bigger than fear, bigger than pain. Hope. And next to her, bleeding and smiling, was the one person who had truly seen her. Not her size, not her blood, but her heart. But her. The stars outside shimmered in endless silence as the old maintenance ship drifted through safe space. For the first time in days, no sirens echoed, no shadows chased them, no threats knocked at the door. Inside the small ship, Lyra sat beside Jonas, her hands steady on the controls. She had set the navigation system to a quiet asteroid colony, far from the trade routes and out of reach from bounty hunters and labs. A place where no one cared about bloodlines or cloning potential. A place where they could just be people. Jonas rested in the co-pilot seat, his body bruised and sore, but his eyes never left Lyra. He watched the way her small frame moved, full of purpose, confidence, and silent strength. He thought back to the first time he saw her, nearly, crushed beneath a crowd of aliens who never gave her a second glance. Back then she had looked so small, so fragile. But now, after all they had faced, Jonas knew the truth. Lyra was bigger than anyone he had ever met. She turned to check his pulse monitor and smiled gently. "You're healing faster than I thought. Must be that stubborn human energy," he gave a weak chuckle. "Or maybe I'm just scared of you now. You ran through fire, stunned bounty hunters, and hacked a reactor in under a minute." She looked away, her face glowing faintly. "I just didn't want to lose you." The words hung in the air, soft and heavy. Jonas sat up straighter despite the pain in his ribs. "Lyra, you didn't just save me. You saved yourself. You faced everything they said you couldn't. And you proved them wrong." Lyra's fingers tightened on her lap. "I used to believe them. That I was too small for love. Too strange. Too different. Even among my people, no one ever looked at me like I could be important." Jonas reached out, placing his large hand over hers. "Well, I'm not most people." She looked at him, eyes wide. "Why me, Jonas? You could have walked away a dozen times. You didn't owe me anything." He smiled. "You don't owe someone for seeing their worth. That's not how love works." Lyra froze at the word. Love. She had read about it, heard stories, seen how others looked at each other with longing and joy, but she never imagined someone might feel it toward her. And now here it was, spoken softly by a man who had bled for her, protected her, and never once made her feel small. "Love?" she whispered. Jonas nodded. "Yes. I don't know when it started. Maybe the moment you pulled out that weird generator and your eyes lit up like you were showing me a treasure. Or maybe it was when you ran straight into danger to save me. But I know it now. I love you, Lyra." Her lips trembled, and for a second she looked away. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. "You're the first person who didn't try to fix me, or hide me, or sell me. You're the first person who looked at me like I mattered." "You've always mattered," he said. "They just couldn't see it." Slowly she leaned toward him. He didn't move, didn't push. He just waited. And when her forehead gently touched his chest, he wrapped his arms around her, carefully like she was made of light. They sat like that for a long time, wrapped in silence and warmth. Her tiny form curled into his embrace, his arms around her like a promise. Later, as the ship approached the colony, Lyra stood at the window looking at the small glowing lights ahead. A simple mining town, dusty, forgotten, but peaceful. "Do you think we'll be safe there?" she asked. Jonas stepped beside her, wrapping a blanket over her shoulders. "Maybe not forever, but long enough to build a life." Lyra leaned her head on his arm. "I've always wanted a place where no one calls me broken, where I can build things without fear, where I can just be me." "You've got it now," he said softly. "You've got me." She turned and looked into his eyes. "You know, I never thought I was big enough for love." Jonas cupped her cheek gently. "That's where you're wrong, Lyra. Your heart is the biggest thing I've ever seen." As the ship landed and the doors opened to soft red sands and cool winds, Lyra stepped out into a new world, not as a fugitive, not as a specimen, and not as a child forgotten by her kind. She stepped out as herself, strong, brilliant, and finally seen. And as Jonas took her hand, walking beside her under the alien sky, she knew the truth. Love wasn't about size. It was about courage, and she had more than enough.